Дорогие коллеги, у нас сложная конкуренция.
Distinguished colleagues, we compete with lunch and the family picturing process, but I would suggest us to start. In order to start the final part of our conference, please take your seats.
If I may, I would like to make a very quick announcement. We found a pair of glasses and a white charger. If you lost your glasses or your charger yesterday, please come here. We have it. Now, over to the panel.
Спасибо большое. Как вы знаете,
Thank you very much. As you know, the conference comprises three parts. The first part is on the challenges and possible disruption of the Putin's regime, and the other one is quite practical. It's about the day after, and right now we start discussing under the third part of the conference, which is on the year after the current Russian regime is over. We're going to be speaking about the future. On the one hand, it's always nice to be speaking about the future, but it's also challenging. In short, the name of the discussion is named Long-Term Deputinization of Russia, but we can be answering the key question, what we should do now, what we should invest our resources into, our skills, what institutions we should establish in order for this long-term future to be possible for our country and for our compatriots to have this future. My name is Kirill MARTYNOV. I'm going to be the moderator of this discussion. I am the editor-in-chief of Novaya Gazeta Europe. We are an independent media established by the journalists who left Russia. We have our legacy in Novaya Gazeta, and it is my honor and pleasure to introduce the panelists. Let's start from the left-hand side. This is a tradition. Grigory FROLOV, Free Russia Foundation. Lena NEMIROVSKAYA, founder of the Moscow School of Civic Education. TYUTRIN, Free Russia Forum, politician. Rasa JUKNEVIČIENḵ, member of the European Parliament, one of our hosts, former Minister of Defense of Lithuania, and the person who hosts us in these worlds, and which is very important. Leonid GOZMAN, in my view, he made an outstanding speech, and unfortunately I was not able to find it in the video stream. I wanted to publish it for our readers. It's classified. Well, I believe that you know Leonid GOZMAN, the politician, Denis, and sociologist. Well, the thing is that I'm a PhD. Well, I'm not full in the profession. It was Denis BILUNOV. Antoine ARJAKOVSKY, historian, politics and religion coordination at Collège de Bernardins, founder of the Institute for Ecumenical Studies in Lviv. I used to live for a long time in Russia and Ukraine, but I work in Paris, France. And Alexander SOLOVYOV, project coordinator, Reforum. Let us discuss our agenda and timing. I believe that the most successful discussions of yesterday and today were the most successful discussions of yesterday and today were more dynamic. Therefore, I would like to ask you not to take long speeches. So after you start, 5 minutes later, I will let you know that you will have to wrap up. This is for us to be able to find this future. and to discuss the way of searching it with our colleagues. And it's hard for me to compete with the brisk political performance of the previous one. Many of us started taking our jackets off. Some of us left it. And I would like to say that I fully support Kirill Moskalenko in her expressions. It is about gender equality. Before we start, please let me say an introductory word. I believe that we can imagine an experiment. The war is over one day, and we hope that, and we work on this, for this to result in peace and justice for Ukraine, that the Russian occupants will be pushed out of the Ukrainian territory. What is going to happen to Russia after that? For a few times this has been said that in general it is clear that the most evident thing expecting our country, if everything continues as is the attempt of a new revanche. It seemed to us that the Russian Federation was the Weimar Republic after 1991, so it was in 2014 and then in 2022, and we witnessed it. But I believe we can build these parallels endlessly. Young people in Russia living in the environment of poor education, propaganda, total propaganda, poverty, and lies from all the sides, they will grow in an environment where in 10 to 20 years they would like to punish somebody of the so-called enemies who unluckily surround Russia, as those Führers say. And we could see this for the last few years especially. Therefore, I would like to ask one of the questions to our participants and our panelists. What is the thing that gives birth to Russian revanchism? There's a popular idea that Putin is nuts, but I think that this is not good enough to understand what's going on with our country. And for us to know how to avoid this in the future, what needs to be done in order to learn the lesson that Germans learned. And the lesson is that the only political slogan about the war which is acceptable is never again. I'd like to say that if we refer to the future, we should remember that there are other challenges in Russia apart from Putin and the things that happen in our country. Here they have already raised the issue of environment, and it is especially relevant today after exploding the Kakhovskaya hydropower plant. We've discussed the issue of gender equality in various countries, and the audience was ready to discuss this issue both in the conference room and in the lobby, so we will have to do something with gender equality. We won't be able to build a democracy in Russia without progressing with gender equality and gender representation. And the thing which goes beyond the boundaries of our conference, but surprisingly and horribly changes our culture, this is the issue about technologies, the so-called AI. We will have to deal with this in a year and in a decade. Therefore, when we speak about the future of Russia, we should remember not only about Putin and about overcoming him, but about the convoluted global context in which all of us are in. We are on board the same boat, Russia, Europe, and the whole world. And now I would like to pass the floor to our panelists. It seems to me that our generation has the last chance to keep Russia after this war. And when I say about maintaining Russia, I do not mean the great state or enormous territories or strong government or any empire, but I mean the right of the people to live life in dignity and freedom. This is what we have always lacked in our country, and this is what we can overlook and miss if the history enters a new circle that we are seeing now. One of the lessons is the lesson by Grigory, one of the most important representatives of the Polish immigration in the 19th century. He was the chief editor of the Culture magazine, and he suggested his compatriots to do soul-searching of the role of Poland in Europe. Being the patriot of his country, he used to say that free and independent Poland would be only in a situation when there would be strong and independent Lithuania and Ukraine, leaving all other issues behind the brackets like territorial disputes, empires, etc., because only such strong countries will be able to withstand imperial thinking and empires. We have things to learn from European intellectuals, from Giedroyc and others, because it seems to me that free Russia is only possible if there's a strong and independent Ukraine. I would like to pass the floor and to open our discussion. I would like to pass the floor over to you, because it seems to me that your lessons and your career and your resistance to empire 30 years ago was and is an important lesson to us Russians, and we have to learn it. Thank you. I decided to be speaking Russian today. My Russian is not as good as I wanted it to be, but still, both languages, English and Russian, are not my mother tongues. Therefore, I would like more people, well, maybe there will be some video broadcasting, for the people to understand what we are speaking about here. And I don't know, maybe not all of you will like it, but I always tell to my colleagues here in the parliament that the only good thing that I got from the Soviet occupation in occupied Lithuania was forceful learning of the Russian language. And now, well, I wouldn't refer to the name, but I can even, I even able to listen to SOLOVYOV, Russian propaganda talking head on TV. Well, not you, Mr. SOLOVYOV. You know what Mr. SOLOVYOV I mean. And this military criminal. Yes, this was about the language. And now, speaking of the gender issue, yes, here we ensure some gender equality here, but out of my own experience, I know when I was a Minister of Defense and I was on a mission to Afghanistan to visit our units, there were members of local parliaments, and they were coming to me, touching me, trying to believe that a lady could be a defense minister, but this is not relevant to this audience. Getting back to our discussion, this is a paradox, but when Putin started the war, he started deputinization, not in Russia, but in Europe, for sure. Because in Europe and in other countries, in the West and in the democratic nations, Putinization was on a full scale. I'm not going to reiterate the issues of culture and everything that they used, the various centers, political things, corruption, everything was there. It has been mentioned. I'm not going to dwell on other things. I have only 5 minutes left dedicated for me, but I've already spent a long time. So the key long-term goal for us in this panel, and for me, the citizen of Lithuania and the member of the European Parliament, is to have sustainable peace in Europe. We should reach that. And without non-aggressive democratic Russia, this will be impossible. It will be impossible to have sustainable world on this continent. Indeed, a lot needs to be done for that. This is about the future of Ukraine, its membership in the EU, in NATO, to to hold Russia while it is an empire, and special tribunal, demilitarization and denuclearization of Russia might happen in the future, because what we could see today is associated with that. But now I would like to refer to history and to lies. The lies as the foundation, the basis for this empire. The key thing is to cognize yourself for Russians, for Russian citizens, because many in Lithuania, but there were quite a lot of people who were Sovietized. We still have people who were brainwashed by the Soviet rule, and they managed to put them on their track. You know, yesterday I thought of the following thing, why we should be speaking about history even more. A few panelists, excellent panelists whom we saw yesterday, when talking about Putin, they said, like Hitler. But I think we should be saying like Stalin. Why not like Stalin? As for me, Putin is Hitler and Stalin all together. And when Russians do not speak about Stalin, this means that not everything is good about history there, because if you say like Stalin in Russia, this will not be like offensive or bad. So this is the core of what we have here, what we have in that state. Here at the parliament, there's a group, I lead a group. This group is about memory, and in 2019 we adopted a resolution about Molotov-Ribbentrop agreement. It was back then 80 years ago. My time elapses, but I need to tell you, I need to quote this resolution adopted back then, which was not to the liking of the regime. And for the first time in the European Union, in the official document, it was said, I quote, stressing that the Second World War, the most devastating war in the history of Europe, started as a direct outcome of the said agreement between Soviet and German regimes on non-attacking of 1939, called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Act, and its confidential annexes, according to which two totalitarian regimes who wanted to conquer the world divided Europe into two influence zones. And it also says that the war was started by both. And when people are aware in Russia, when they are accountable for the past, not only the Soviet past, but the imperial past of the Russian Empire from the Tsar times, when they become aware that this history was a tragedy for all other surrounded nations, when they become aware of the colonial nature of their history, this is going to be not like Hitler only, but also like Stalin, because this is what we see today. Thank you very much. In order for us to have the future, we have to think about the most difficult concept in our history, like the Great Patriotic War, allegedly speaking. This was the concept in order to wipe out the Second World War in the Soviet historical books. And I would like you to mention the book by your mother, which is on the table at the desk. It was published yesterday in Russian, and I thought maybe it had to be translated into English. My mom, like many other children, were deported from Lithuania in 1941 prior to Hitler occupying us. These were the most horrible deportations to Siberia, to Altai, parents were sent separately. They got to the camps. I'm not going to dwell more on the book. I believe that we can find this book. The book is in Vilnius, and I can share the book with those of you who are based in Vilnius. So this book is in Russian, and it's important. I really appreciate Natalia Frolova, who translated the book into Russian. You know what? We visited Siberia once. I was there in 2001, right after Putin came to power. There was a paradox. I was traveling together with my mom and dad in order to visit these sites after so many years. There was one thing. For my mom, just like for all Lithuanians, it is very important to have a cemetery, you know, the place, the graves where we go for sorrow, and because we go to cemeteries in our homeland, and she wanted to see the place where her father was buried, and she couldn't find anything. In the Rashota town, there was nothing, no memory, just a forest. And when you're there, you feel that under the roots of the trees, there are hundreds of thousands of people, including Russians, from the Lenin's times and other times are buried there, and you see and know nothing. There is nothing there. There are so many camps like that. When she got back to Lithuania, she was in tears because she couldn't find anything. And back then, in 2001, people could go there. We found a diaspora in Krasnoyarsk, diaspora of Lithuanians, and the first deportations started 60 years ago back then, and they organized an event, and we had to stand up there, and the hymn was played. It was the Soviet one, and we had to stand to it. Many young people went there. They erected lots of crosses, and they made monuments. They found the cemetery of Lithuanians. They found places in Siberia where not only Lithuanians and others were buried. And right now we're getting the news that they destroy these monuments in Siberia, and multiple of them, many of them, were destroyed in recent weeks, have been destroyed in recent weeks. So this is like Stalin. And this is going to be very important for the future in Russia, and for Russia to be understood by those who live nearby, my compatriots, to understand those Ukrainians, Lithuanians, Latvians, for everybody to understand Russia. Unfortunately, there are few people like Andres Kubilius and me, those people who believe that in my life Russia will turn different. But still, there are only few people like that. Thank you so much. I would like to pass the floor to Denis Bilunov. Denis Bilunov, as I understand it, does not believe that a bright democratic future will come and achievable, but he believes we should continue trying. Thank you. Just like all previous panelists, I would like to appreciate the hosts for organizing this beautiful event, because it is very important to us, and I hope that we will continue working on that. We will continue working on getting the democratic future of Russia closer. However, Kirill introduced me as a person who is pessimistic about this forecast, but I have to explain what is meant. The first impulse to think about that emerged in March last year, when on the wave of empathy to refugees in Czech Republic. There were a lot of Ukrainian refugees. There was an ad hoc community of Russian language citizens of Russia mostly established there. They were volunteers helping refugees. And by some miracle, we organized a large gathering in Prague. It was the largest meeting of the type. The citizens of Russia were there, only them, a few thousands of people. We were in the Sremskaya Square. It was an event for the Czech media, because the stereotype thinking of Russians is like those are the people of Putin, and it was impressive. And then I thought that it is very important for people, for the Russians living in other countries, to feel themselves not associated with the aggressor country, and the logic and practice bring me to cooperation with the representatives of other countries. In July last year, we had the first Prague convent of the Russian civil society organizations. I was surprised to see so many people there, and people paid for this. It was a grassroots event. And then I realized that the Free Russians Network is not only eligible, but we should be working on this seriously and for a long time. I have been working on this with multiple officials from Czechia, with the Germans, Americans, and I can see that at the backdrop of practically no contradictory full-fledged strategy about the future of Russia, Andres Kubilius used to write a lot about that this strategy should be about Russia to become a democracy, but the challenge is not what it should become, but how this is going to happen. If we call it in the right way, then I would say that Western leaders do not take risks of a full-fledged intervention into Russian affairs in order to fully, as the previous panelist said, to fully eliminate Putin's regime. It is clear that if we speak about military interventions, that would not be possible at all. As Gennady Gutkov said, Putin is safely protected by the nuclear shield, but if we speak about various plans to substitute him through the yard coup, and then if this scenario is possible, then when talking to Americans, I'm call it the scenario of a minor son of a bitch, and they start smiling and they continue talking. I mean, the situation in Russia is not going to change a lot. Minor son of a bitch will get a lot of opportunities as a compromise to keep all these horrible traits of the regime that we want to change in order to get democratic Russia. So I think we should get ready to a situation when for a few years Russia will rot in this condition, which will be ugly and disturbing, in order for this process not to continue endlessly like in case of Cuba. Again, I have been cooperating a lot with the Cuban community in Florida, and I believe we can learn from them. They have achieved a lot in the US, but the situation in Cuba has not improved, unfortunately. So for this not to happen with us, we will have to undertake enormous efforts in order to build this community, which I call Free Russians Network. Well, naming of it makes sense, because when they say good Russians, it's horrible naming. And you know, the consequences, sad consequences in the media environment caused by that. But a Free Russian is a better definition or wording. I believe there should be an institutional body to be recognized by the European community and by the US, and our strategic goal is to challenge the right of the Kremlin regime to be speaking on behalf of Russian citizens, to create an alternative center of power. It makes sense and it is feasible only if we are based on a huge number of people, and I think this is a critical thing, and the people who have been leading political immigration in Russia do not feel this really. Ekaterina Shudman said today, think about the scale. The latest immigration wave is from 600,000 to 1.2 million of people. And if we refer to the people, and it's important, if we refer to the people who left before, we speak about a few million people. So we can get closer to this if we manage to achieve a group, to have a community of at least 150,000 people. But unfortunately, this capacity is estimated less by me. This is what we can see. So enormous efforts are required. I've written a concept paper published in the internet. I have been discussing it with many politicians from US and Europe. In Prague, we will have a conference in autumn. Those of you interested in this, and those of you ready to discuss it practically, so get in touch with me and share your opinions with me. Thank you.
Конечно, я ожидал в словах Дениса услышать что-то более такое хтоническое и мрачное.
Thank you. Of course, I expected Denis to be quite grim while he's speaking about some upcoming convention, which is not that bad. I just wanted to finish on a positive note. And now I'd like to give the floor to Grigory FROLOV from Free Russia Foundation, who, as I understand, will tell how we can organize solidarity beyond Russia in our region, in Eastern Europe, building on his experience in Kiev. Well, almost about this. Surely we have to start with thanks to all who have contributed to this conference, first of all. Reporters on Russia in the European Parliament and our dear partners, thanks to whom we're here, and also to thank everyone that you are back from lunch to talk to us. Honestly, I am more about practice than long-term reflections. I would like to introduce some important principles which I deem significant based on this current trend and the amazing moment in which we may end up according to the idea of this panel. And probably I will phrase them around the main idea of our Free Russia Foundation, which include things such as support of relocating activists, working with Ukrainian and Belarusian civil societies, things associated with accountability for people guilty of the fact that we have political prisoners and prisoners of war, and that we have war crimes conducted by Russian citizens. So that's what I want to outline. Russia is a highly unfair and unbalanced country, and if we find ourselves in a moment when we are lucky enough to contribute to some new Russia, Russia 2.0, or the better version of this future, we should be starting with some fundamental principles that this injustice and lack of balance should be addressed despite of certain things associated with politics. So the thing number one, this injustice in Russian colonial policies vis-à-vis its neighbors. First of all, we mean Ukraine and the war, and that what we will have to do when this war is over. Because we know that there are things like reparations and other things Russia will have to do, but it will not be about what we will be forced to do, but about what we will want to do. And I think that we need to assume responsibility for restoring Ukraine, occupied territories of Georgia and Moldova, and restoring unfair processes unraveling in Central Asia and other territories affected by activities of Russian Federation in recent times. Without this, we cannot speak about Russia of the future if we don't take measures for correcting this injustice. Second, addressing imbalance and injustice inside Russia vis-à-vis national republics and regions. Many things have been said about this. Well, actually, not so many things. We need much more of it. But still, one more time about it. If we see some scenario in which Russia is preserved and it continues, it has to be reinstituted as deeply federalized country with huge rechanneling of all resources towards regions. When I'm speaking about this, I not only mean that regions need more money and more rights. I also mean that Moscow should have less money and less rights. So I think that Moscow should be the city no one wants to move to. And by the way, I think this would be a good political stance to talk to the population of future Russia. Third, although we have jokes, we have gender disbalance and power disbalance. It should also be addressed. Some people might say that it's not a good time for it during the war. There are more important tasks on the table. I would like to remind that Ukraine has the decommunized version of the day, which is called the Day of Defender of the Homeland, during which both men and women are congratulated if they defend their homeland. And the Ukrainian president says, "Dear Ukrainians," using both male and female forms of this word. And I think it's important. I have quite long experience of living in Kiev, and there are many things for us to see and learn. The great decentralization reform would change the country, not only bringing it closer to the people, but also making it more battle capable, because people are thinking more about their own regions. And when we speak about federalization, this can be a great example. There is a great example of domestic violence legislation and, in general, civil society participation in decision-making and policy-making. This is definitely something that we can borrow. Such examples, however, exist not only in Ukraine, also Central Asia and in Caucasus. And it's important for us that Russia of the future learns from these examples, realizing that actually we are lagging behind our neighbors in these regards. Last, about migration and this 1 million persons. Actually, when the window of opportunity opens, we will not speak about 1 million. We will speak about a huge number of people dropping out of the Russian society, not only relocated, but also passed away or willing to leave again, because these will be tough times, and we will yet think, what are we ready to give to these people, and are we ready to take them back to Russia, because not actually everyone is willing to return. And we can see very well that in the exile communities there are two viewpoints, and there are also people who have made their final decision that they don't want to come back. And they have very different opinions from people who would like to come back. And we again will have towards this balance. Thank you. Thank you, Grigory. I think everyone is interested by this question about methods that you want to use to oppress Moscow and Moscovites, and maybe also to deport the people who don't want to come back to Russian regions. Well, to introduce some irony. Although I do agree that the idea on Moscow might be popular. Now I want to give the floor to Mr. GOZMAN, who delivered an amazing speech yesterday, and hopefully he will do so today as well, and who is one of the most consistent defenders of the right of our compatriots to the right to electing their future, choosing their future, and that making sure that this future is kind and respectful to all our neighbors. Thank you. It's quite difficult to live up to such a bombastic presentation. We should not only thank Mr. Kubilius, Lagodinsky and other reporters for this Congress, but for all their activities, without which the lives of all people sitting here would be much worse. Maybe not everyone is aware. We would have a much harder time getting residence permits. We would have much harder times settling here. So much has been done by the group, Friends of European Russia. Regarding the topic, this is the forecast. As someone said, forecasting is very challenging, especially the future. It's hard to forecast the future. Of course, there are some preconditions for the country to have future, for a country or a group of countries which emerge to substitute it, which I find quite realistic, that Russia disintegrates. There is some necessary precondition for this country or a group of countries to have normal future. It's not only the military defeat of Putin and his political defeat and dismantling, and some things also are up to us. This is what we have to explain to our Western friends, that if they want peace in Europe, with all different conditions, something similar to May 1945 should happen. This regime has to disappear. Full, unconditional surrender should happen. Although occupation of Russia is not possible, and clearly it will not materialize, but we and the Western civilization, and we are the part of the Western civilization, we, me and you, cannot coexist on the same earth with Putin, not only with Putin but also with his regime, and we have to persuade others. I think it's our duty. So if we succeed, we need to realize, ladies and gentlemen, that this future in which we want to organize this deep deputinization will not be the repetition of 1991-92, when we will be able to correct all mistakes of those times. This will not be our power. This will be dictatorship. Most likely, this will be smarter dictatorship than this one. This might be a dictatorship in which you can live and you can breathe. Such dictatorships exist in the world. But it will not be democracy. It will not be the amazing Russia of the future. We will not have it in the nearest future. Somehow we need to be conscious about it. Where will it come from? Is it only because we want it? The half of population voted for Putin. This is truth. They did vote for Putin. This is not Panfilova who counted that. Panfilova added more votes, but still there were real votes as well. So we have to realize that we will live in a very tough context. What is deputinization actually? I will not speak about the need of tribunals and about the need for civil education in the presence of Lena NEMIROVSKAYA. I will not speak about it. She knows everything better than anyone about it, and she is the best in it. But my point will be the following. The psychological basis of dictatorship is low self-esteem. The low self-esteem and the idea that it's not possible to deal with us. We must be controlled. This is the idea that it's natural for us to have Stalin and Ivan the Terrible, while Alexander II or Gorbachev are deviations which should not materialize in Russia. It only makes things worse. It's also the idea that we have imperial thinking and the spirit of slavery. Come on, what imperial thinking do you think? On 13th January 1991, in Vilnius, the television tower was attacked, and 13 people were killed. On the next day, almost 1 million people went to the streets of Moscow protesting against this crime. They did not go to support Lithuania being kept as the part of Soviet Union. No, they protested and they wanted Lithuania to be free. Are they also imperialists? Spirit of slavery? Come on, what spirit of slavery? Remember, heroic examples of fighting for freedom demonstrated by our compatriots. And you know what? Every time they say democracy is for people who respect themselves. Democracy is for people with high self-esteem. Democracy presumes respect of law and ability of people to rule their own lives, to make decisions about what to produce, the price to offer, what to say, where to go. So every time when you look down on our compatriots or show contempt to them, every time when you allow to say that they are all slaves, every time when you do it, you help Vladimir Putin. You contribute to his cause. Don't do this. Thank you. Thank you, Leonid. Although, in addition to this humanistic thesis, we also hear the second thesis, that still democracy is not a realistic prospect for us. We will respect each other, but we will face tyranny. Well, it is not in the nearest future that we will reach democracy. It's like with pregnancy. We have this prenatal term of 9 months, and even if you want this to happen sooner, if it happens sooner, it will bring the death of the child. We need to face the reality, and that's the reality. The reality is that many people in Russia, they are not only capable of democracy, they are, but they don't want it today, they don't understand it today. During a focus group organized after one more election of Putin, one lady said that Yavlinsky was very good. He is young, he is intellectual, and the moderator asked, "Did you vote for Yavlinsky?" She said, "No, for Putin." The moderator asked, "Why for Putin?" And the lady answered, "Because if Yavlinsky becomes the president, then we will vote for him." I will give the floor to Ivan Turin, representing Free Russia Forum. And before this discussion, I have sent my preliminary questions, the first being about some serious sociological or historical reasons, except Putin, for this catastrophe, which is the war against Ukraine, to become our reality. And maybe Ivan wants to address this topic. Thank you, Kirill. Kirill has identified the frames for our discussion quite clearly, and I want to fit this. This is why I have put my points on paper. One of the points of discussion in recent years is that the current war against Ukraine, is it Putin's war or Russia's war? Different interpretations are possible for opinion polls, trying to understand the share of people who actually support the war. I took a different perspective of this and asked it differently. Was the emergency of a totalitarian dictatorship and aggression of Ukraine the objective result of Russia's development after collapse of the Soviet Union, or this is the result of unsuccessful choice of successor in 1999? I tend to be inclined to version 1. There are different factors. I have identified the key ones. The Russian society still stays within imperial metrics, having 500 years of imperialism behind their backs with short periods of democratization attempts, unsuccessful attempts, and actually this period to which Leonid was referring actually belongs to these periods. On this background, the defeat in Cold War created the foundation of the new Russian Russian state the idea of geopolitical revenge, which came out during 2007 Munich speech of Putin, and we have been observing the consequences of the speech for 15 or 16 years. Putin formulated his worldview quite clearly, and he sticks to it. Next, starting with 1993, Russia underwent the process of destroying the new democratic institutions, shooting the parliament in October 1993, constitution tailored for Yeltsin, rigged elections. They turned this young state towards authoritarianism, and it took a couple of decades for us to get this established personalistic dictatorship. In 2008, Georgia was invaded, attacked. In 2014, Ukraine was invaded, and in 2022, this full-fledged invasion, this became the objective development of Putin's regime and the result of degradation for 30 years. The fundamental problem of Russia, in my view, is that it never conducted the transition from archaic state to the modern nation-state. In archaic state, the nation is not an actor of political process, which is fully applicable to the population of Russia. For years, it has not been the political actor, and it makes no difference on what is happening in Russia. The Russian nation is not established. It's not, because there is the core of national identity is missing, the common answer to the question who we are. Because of the lack of understanding of who we are, we have stronger hatred against them. The West, Europe, Ukraine, Lithuanians. In early 21st century, Russia remains an archaic state. And that's the reason why in mass mentality they still have they see no difference between the words such as the government, the state, the country, the ruler. This is why being an oppositionist for many Russian citizens is seen as a betrayal. Many people think that if a Russian speaks against Putin, they speak against Russia. And it's very hard to break this understanding. The slogan, "Victory to Ukraine, freedom to Russia," is a commonplace for Russian opposition today. The Berlin Declaration, containing the most important provisions, became the consolidated platform of Russian civil society, which of course has good prospects for cooperation and advancing. It's important that the Russian opposition is trying to find an answer what is to be done after the disintegration of Putin's regime. And I think the idea of reinstitution of the state is important in this regard. But it's also very important to identify the goal of breaking the archaic model of the state, which is non-competitive in today's world. Russia needs to establish contemporary state ruled by law, which will be a part of free world. Otherwise, we are facing the visible threat of the collapse of Russian statehood and turning into the province of China. I think there is no third path. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ivan. The recipe of the future is to try to turn into a modern state where there is difference between criticism of government and betrayal of the motherland. So far, this idea doesn't make much sense back in home in Russia for many people. I'm giving the floor to Lena NEMIROVSKAYA, the founder of the Moscow School of Civil Education, which has made one of the most significant contributions into making Russia capable of being a modern state and a contemporary political framework. Elena, the floor is yours. First, like everyone, I'm tremendously grateful to Andrew Skubilius and Sergei Lagodinsky for their initiative and implementing it to bring together this outstanding group of people who might have different ideas but still agreeing on main points. And second, this great audience in which, and this is something to be considered in the future, there is no place left for discussion. I am saying this almost as a professional, because I've been working for 30 years on leaving some space for discussion. The next thing I would like to say, and first of all for myself, I bring my apologies. I observed young people speaking here yesterday, and outstanding young women, and I thought, what should I say when I come here, and what will be my excuse for my age at this table? I don't know if I will live to see the future Russia, but the fact that in my lifetime I lived through childhood under Stalin, and I'm coming back to Stalinism. So by the end of my life, so far, I'm still with Iosif Vissarionovich. I thought about it, and I tried to find some excuse, thinking that maybe it's through me or some other people. The Soviet experience of dissidents is now leaving the initiative to this young group of people who don't actually need some pro-governmental circles in their position. What they need are horizontal ties. And this is a very new thing that we see. It has to be encouraged all the time. This gender component and this network of active lifestyle and active responsibility for your life. Third, and I often repeat it in my team, everyone knows this favorite quotation of mine. Ancient philosopher Seneca has once said, he said, "Today the harvest is bad, but tomorrow we need to sow." And this is for everyone and forever. And it was said 2,500 years ago. There are always bad times. It's normal. Sometimes we have better times, as it happened to Europe after World War II. Anyway, most of the times are bad. And the problem is what we do personally in these bad times. As the headline of my speech, I chose the following phrase. It will not be long, because we are focusing on the day after. I don't know when it comes, but what will matter? How to live together. The political and national and state problems will emerge. Ukraine and Russia will not move. Belarus will remain where it is. Poland and all Baltic states will stay where they are, but still how to coexist. And I speak on behalf of the International School of Civil Education, which has been existing for more than 30 years. And 30,000 graduates. Everyone will say, Lena, they also include Yarovaya and some other outstanding people coming from our school. Well, I don't speak one half, but a good quarter of people in this room, or with experts included, is half of this room, are graduates of our school. And I have extraordinary gratitude and extraordinary pride in the fact that you have chosen democracy freedom, personal participation in everything, and civil activism. 25 years ago, our school existed in Russia, but for 25 years it existed in Russia. But in 2013 we were designated as the foreign agent. We were the first organization, together with Golos, who were given this great title. We never recognized ourselves as foreign agents, and we found an opportunity to move to Baltic states, because the European Humanities University in Vilnius and Stockholm School of Economics in Riga offered an opportunity to cooperate with them. And we are endlessly grateful. I'm endlessly grateful to our team, which is here, at least its core, which have made their civil choice back in those times and moved together with the school to Vilnius and Riga. We must be very concrete about it. There are many people who have moved here. Many people are losing their pensions, but still people are aging and they need pensions, such as me. But actually, it prevents them from getting their pension in the future. Kirill, don't reproach me. I'm an elderly person and I'm having my floor. And today, the participants of school seminars, like previously, are young politicians, civil society activists, journalists, bloggers, scientists from Russia, Poland, Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, and Caucasus, and Central Asia. And we always speak about imperialism, about the guilt. Let's shift the conversation to discuss our responsibility. I believe that this continuing war is a crime, like everyone in this room, not only against Ukraine, but also about the state of Russia as its contemporary society. Russia is not a contemporary country, which has been said here. Russia is a European country with European culture, but Russia is not a Western country, because it does not believe in, it does not trust, and it does not understand the importance of formal institutions. And what we do in the school, we organize our discussions around this topic. What is the rule of law? What is the municipal life and other things? It's not to teach people. It's not a tactile subject. It's about infecting people with this idea. This is why we are learning, in particular during our seminars, how to solve conflicts peacefully, how to introduce not the culture of war, but the culture of peace. The notion of civil society exists since long ago, because democracy and citizenship, this is something, it is not something that will emerge without our own participation. Both in our East and also in the West we see examples of Brexit and many other things where this democratic feeling is weakening. In my view, today, the citizen is the central figure of today's world. Citizenship is what can be added to any cultural and ethnic identity. It is not given at birth. This is not an instinct. This is something we cannot touch. This originates from some different space where it can be created. But the outcome is not certain, and we have to come to terms with it. Not everything can be pre-planned, and not everything can be touched with someone's hands. And some last remarks, so that Kirill does not frown at me. The task of the civil education is to establish life values and to develop human competences towards comprehending the reality. It's very important to make people think. I can frequently hear this question from Europeans. Why Navalny came back? Why Volodya Kara-Murza came back, whom we know in person, and who is an outstanding phenomenon of our life? To continue, to follow up on it, I always answer the question. Alexei Navalny, Vladimir Kara-Murza, and all victims of repressions, and everyone who were deported from their country today. I want to say, and I want to ask on behalf of all of us, how can we overcome the consequences of the war, which is launched by the mad Russian leadership? And the very last point, you might disagree with it, but we accept it as it is. In our school, the answer to this question, I express it in two words: pacifism and cosmopolitism, but not in that meaning that everyone imagines. I'm trying to add my own meaning to it. By pacifism, I mean anti-war movement and recreation of the peace culture. Under cosmopolitism, I understand the philosophy of global citizenship. Many people speak about AI and technologies today, and we know that all terrorists and people who invaded Ukraine, they all use mobile phones. But we also know that neither mobile phone nor the computer turn the human into an understanding creature. So our civil task is not attached to artificial intelligence. We don't think about artificial mind. During our seminars, we help real human heads to think. And the last thing I want to say, in our school, we speak about the importance of freedom in all cases of life, to use our mind publicly, as Immanuel Kant said.
Thank you, Lena. When looking at you as the violator of the agenda, I thought, how many graduates, how many of your alumni are here in this room? And probably this is a rare opportunity for them and for us to thank you for what you have been doing in the walls of the European Parliament. So let's give us a loud applause to Yelena NEMIROVSKAYA. I'm passing the floor over to Alexander Solovyov, who I believe can focus on the importance of education for our future. Yes, indeed, thank you very much. I would like to thank the hosts, and I'm very happy I have known the MEPs who organized this meeting. And I like the fact that inside the European Parliament, they are listened to more and more. Unfortunately, this is because what they had warned about happened, but on the other hand, this is good news. I would like to say what needs to be done. If we imagine we have to undertake some action to deputinize, everything happens, everything's nice, maybe we can hardly believe in it, but first, we have to recall that a lot of things have been said today about the past, about history, and we have to know and learn what happened after post-war Germany and Japan. But if we speak about the specificity, then the most radical thing that I could see, and frankly speaking, I resisted it, and then I realized that it was necessary for long-term deputinization. It is naturally necessary, first of all, to decrease the scale of celebrating such a holiday as May the 9th, or even to cancel it. Maybe it would be too radical to abandon it, but to abandon military parades for sure, because encouraging the culture of weaponizing should not be underestimated. This is considered a norm today, and this is like dance on bones, and this is like an appeal to some cheap greatness. When you have nothing to be proud of today, then you can get cheap, simple hormones because you are you have the legacy of the winners. Next, teaching history. There's a huge problem of teaching history at schools. I remember my grade 10. Unfortunately, I studied in an ordinary secondary school, and I had a feeling that the country's development and the success of the country is about its expansion. It's about expanding its territory. This is how they teach it. History is taught as the history of the state and the tsars and wars, nothing else. Now I live in Cyprus, and everything is taught under the UK educational system, and I took the school textbooks on history in grades 8 and 9, and it's very different from our textbooks. It is more about lives of people, what they ate, how they lived, what was the income. And that there is no focus on wars, and it is more important. They recognize that there was a colonial policy. It was very bad back then. It was perceived well. Therefore, the expansion policy was there. So, in short, I'm going to follow briefly. Also, teaching history in Russia focuses on approving authoritarian modernizers. The era of Alexander II, for example, was more successful, just according to statistics, but it's not associated among students with any reforms or any success stories. If you ask an ordinary pupil who was the modernizer in the history of Russia, they will say either Stalin or Peter I. Naturally, it was strengthened by Stalin in order to intensify the meaning of what was done by Peter I or Ivan the Terrible. But, for example, if we speak about the Mongol conquering, then this teaching is very dangerous. What I mean, at schools, they teach us from early years that Mongol conquering was successful because we were separated. But this is not true. The seizures of Mongols were so successful because they were more advanced technically, and they could get all the land that they could reach, and not only separated lands of dukes. So the danger is that there's a conclusion of a student that centralized power, even if you have no rights respected, but since we give all the authorities to one place, to the center, this protects us, and this is a matter of existence. Also, schools teach that forceful modernization is good, and they give you the names of Stalin and Peter I as modernizers, but nobody is going to refer to the peaceful economic development during, they say, Mikhailovich, Elizaveta Petrovna, or even Khrushchev. And one of the last points, I would like to mention the importance of showing things in the movies. Look at what happens now. They endlessly show policemen, special service officers, and in order to show how close they are to the people, they are shown as hustlers who break the law a bit. Therefore, these are our guys. So there's no protagonist who is a software engineer. Nobody is going to encourage and promote the image of a software engineer through the TV series. This will have to be done more actively in terms of, some movies will have to be shown forcefully on TV. They will have to be broadcasted all the time, because if we recall 1945, some documentaries of what happened in concentration camps were watched by the people forcefully. Like, people would go to the movies, so they would let people in, they would lock the doors, and they would show them the documentaries on the concentration camps of the fascist Germany. Thank you, Alexander. It seems to me that if your final part of the speech would be shown by RC, then they would say that Solovyov promotes this propaganda of software engineers, and then they could portray horrible perspectives. But you have focused on the importance of historical education, and I think it is a good time to pass the floor to the professional historian, Antoine ARJAKOVSKY, who will dwell on the projects helping Ukraine and Russian dissidents, and who has a very interesting expertise of Russian culture, philosophy, and Orthodox Church, having this unique optics. Thank you. Thank you, Kirill. I will do my best speaking Russian. However, I have not been speaking Russian in public for a long time. It's a great honor for me to be here, and I'm thankful to all those who invited me. In fact, I am a historian, and I lived for 17 years in Russia, Ukraine. I worked at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of France, and I was engaged in building the French University College under the Moscow State University, and I was engaged in multiple projects. Then I got back to Paris, and now I work there as the Director of Research at the Collège de Bernardins, which is the French think tank, which is very actively searching for answers in the Russia-Ukraine dilemma. We have 200 experts community. We have published proposals on how to design peace. In 2019, we established a committee of truth, fairness, and governance. It was the Boris Yeltsin Institute, the University from Lviv, and Memorial. Of course, we were hardly heard. Right now, the context is different. We launched a new project. We will officially launch it on June the 17th at Collège de Bernardins. We have 18 proposals on how to support Ukraine and how to establish peace in Europe. And we have 100 plus experts. This is a famous institute working on a European project. The Open Diplomacy University. There is a Fraunhofer and other structures. And the 14th proposal is to establish partnership with the Russian democratic opposition, together with the French government and European authorities, etc. Therefore, it is my great pleasure being here today. Now, regarding our workshop, indeed, I am a historian. In short, it's difficult to conclude, but we all agree that the reasons for the war are not only political but also historiographic and religious. Therefore, since we speak about policy and religion, then we can compare this with the French and German wars. The wars were also politically religious. On the one hand, there were those who wanted to give rebirth to empire, Napoleon III first and then Hitler in Germany, and those who, like Ernest Renaud, believed that the option to this religion and policy was the nation and the state, and the nation and the state has only one characteristic: it is based on moral consciousness. And of course, Ukraine, which has created its revolution, the revolution of dignity, is an example of the alternative religious political project based on moral consciousness. And since we are convinced in having this analog between the French-German war and the Russian and Ukrainian war, it's important to see how we can exit the war, how we can start the process of deputinization. We have to look at what happened between France, Germany, UK during the war. And there was a critical moment. In May 1943, it was unity. Bernardins knows this very well. It was unity between Charles de Gaulle on the one side and the National Resistance Committee. They launched a joint program and agreement. Why is it important today? Because I think this is the Kairos moment we're living through now. The Russian democratic opposition should unite between itself in the West around the program. On the other hand, it should establish ties with the resistance in Russia. Various facets of resistance. Navalny and the people who fight with the weapons, something needs to be invented. When I speak about unity, this does not mean abandoning diversity. Yesterday, somebody said that unity is bad. I disagree. De Gaulle, Jean-Blanc, Churchill, and De Gaulle had a unity. All of those who were fighting against Hitler, ultimately, they won. So unity does not abandon diversity. Unity organizes the hierarchy of truth and of priorities. And now I would like to explain this. This means that we are going to organize a congress in September in Normandy, because this is our partner. Normand is going to host also people from the Russian democratic opposition to discuss what can be the condemnation of the Putin's crimes, but also of the communist crimes. We've discussed it with Stéphane Courtois, who wrote the Black Book of Communism. We shall establish the tribunal for Russia. There should be the reform of the Orthodox Church and ecclesiology, and in France they are experienced because the theology of Saint Sergei in Paris, well, nobody knows about this Renaissance in Russia. They know Ivan Ilyin, but they don't know Sergei Bulgakov. And in fact, this is a totally new approach to theology through ecumenistic approach. And the third thing, naturally, it's important to discuss what workshops and trainings should be on new history. We started working on this with Ukrainian and Russian historians like Zubov and Grabovich and others. And Justice Tribunal, the last word. I have been commenting the events of the last year, the war between Russia and Ukraine, between the West and Russia on French TV, and I keep saying, look at the Russian democratic opposition. We're not going to have peace without the Russian Action Committee, and they immediately reply, but there we do not see unity, we do not see that this is promising. It seems to me this is why it is important to think about unity in diversity through prioritizing, and the key is to stop reproaching one another, thinking that immigrants are not aware of what's going on in the field, and those who fight the regime, who fight dictatorship, they do not comprehend this. So I believe it's important to unite now, and sorry for my Russian. Thank you very much. Well, in fact, we should have started discussion of our future strategy, but since we didn't manage to stay within the time boundaries, we do not have time left. Moreover, I know that one feasible organizational proposal was introduced by Maxim Katz when we agreed with him that I would give him the floor on how he helps small organizations, and when he describes your activities on his YouTube channel, he left at the same time. So I think that this is a picturesque detail. Unfortunately, we have 1 minute left, and I would like to give this 1 minute to the host party in order to wrap up this discussion. Thank you. I won't be able to conclude, and I was following the agenda. I was brief. That's the way I think. So right now, well, certainly many things have not been said. The only thing I would like to mention, I have been listening to the beautiful panelists. It was Russophobia was mentioned. Fear is one of the foundations of the regime in Russia, and not only of this regime. The same was during the Soviet regime. This was during the Tsar times. That's what I know from history books, and we are called Russophobes. And until February 24th in the West, they used to think that Poles, Lithuanians, Latvians were crazy about that because we had historical trauma, that we had such a story of ours. But no, it's not us, but Putin is afraid of his people. He is afraid of Russia, of free people. Therefore, we should call everything in its own natural way. And thank you for this panel. Thank you very much.